Welcome to Ask a Responsive Fundraiser, where we take your questions to a fundraising expert so that you can grow generosity. Today, we're taking your questions to Griff Bohm. Griff is the co-founder and CRO of Momentum. He's a behavioral psychologist by training with a focus on financial decision-making and philanthropy from CU Boulder. He's led major capital campaigns for international nonprofits and has been working at the intersection of AI, psychology, and giving since before ChatGPT was cool. So, Griff, thanks so much for taking some time to answer some questions today.
Thanks so much for having me, Scott.
All right, we're going to jump right into the first one. It's this. We've seen success with traditional monthly giving, but donor retention is still a challenge. So, how can we rethink recurring giving in a way that's more emotionally engaging and habit forming for donors without overcomplicating our systems?
Yeah, so I love this question. This was something where we did a lot of work on it. Back when I was sort of a researcher, and the psychology here is really clear that you want to be able to attach sort of like a salient daily action for
Mm,
people to something where they're going to give. So, you can do something where it's like if you're a food bank, maybe every time one of your donors buys groceries, they make a donation, right? Every time, we once ran a campaign at Momentum where it was like every time you pass, or every time Steph Curry, who's a basketball player in San Francisco, made a three-pointer, you would give to homelessness, which was a big problem in the city of San Francisco, right? And so it was sort of a
yeah.
community-based action tied to a donation. I mean, what we know here is just millennials, specifically younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, really, really care about the impact, and the impact story matters. It's one of the most important sort of indicators of giving.
Yeah.
And so, to the extent you're able, like when you can create that recurring motion around something that is like a daily, day-to-day impact for folks, right? Like we had an org once that was, I think they did every time you bought a coffee, you gave to clean water in the developing world. Um, that sort of thing is really, really salient for people, and it's really, really sticky, right? And so we've
Yeah.
we've seen that work really, really well. And it doesn't have to be complicated. A lot of times, the second part of that question was about like overcomplicated systems. A lot of times you just say, look, on average, the average person buys this many coffees a day, or a month rather, maybe. Pledge to give, this amount kind of in concurrence with that. And it can be fairly simple to set up.
Yeah, I love that, and that's yeah, just to be able to tie into those daily habits or rhythms or those things is super powerful. All right, question number two: recurring giving is often positioned as a revenue strategy, but we're trying to include donor relationships in how we think about recurring. So, how do you frame the role of automation and triggers in strengthening that long-term donor connection, not just driving a transaction?
So, yeah, automations and triggers. I mean, I love that. That's like such a great and juicy one. One of the things that I think I sometimes think about, and we talk about like with our team, is this analogy of like a piggy bank. And you can put money into the account and you can withdraw money. And I think a
Hmm.
lot of times when you talk to fundraisers, one of the things they feel really uncomfortable about is that they end up kind of going to withdraw money from the piggy bank a lot.
Yeah,
And one of the rules that I always try to sort of stick with is like, look, make three deposits before you make a withdrawal. And a deposit doesn't have to be like something super heavy, right? It can just be like, hey, I read this and thought of you. I think that's a deposit, that's a depository kind of action or
yeah,
of a message. And so I think like when you talk about automations and triggers, like what you should be thinking about is like, okay, is this a deposit or a withdrawal? And you want to be really strategic in the asks. You want to make sure that you have good asks that are in the moment and as best you can, sort of like capturing people at a point in time. But I also think that like maybe there are some moments or maybe there are some sort of triggers out there, so to speak, where it's a better moment to make a deposit than a withdrawal.
mm,
And I think once you frame it for yourself in that way, you're able to sort of make sure that the account is always full, right? You're not always overdrawing on the account and the piggy bank is never empty.
yeah. Yeah, that deposit withdrawal framework I think is really helpful for people to think through, knowing it's not just always withdrawals, but you're actually putting into the account as well.
Right.
All right, question number three, our last one. How can fundraising teams start to integrate behavioral science into their strategies to re-energize giving without relying on constant campaigns and asks?
Yeah, this is a great one. I mean, there's so many good little pieces of, behavioral science is obviously a very broad field with a lot of pieces to it, but I think just doing some very basic bits around, in a lot of cases, I think sort of influence, if you've ever heard of that, or like Robert Cialdini wrote the book. Um, to the extent you can, you want to create sort of like social proof or evidence among people. I've heard of folks who host galas, right? Sort of like the big annual gala, and they will line up donors to be able to sort of say, like during the auction, right? They, like they can kind of load the deck, so to speak, to make
Sure.
sure that they're getting and that's really like the most basic form of behavioral science actually there. Like I think if you're already doing that, poof, you're already doing behavioral science. Congratulations. Um, and so, I think like leaning on influence, I think one of the biggest things is also like visibility matters a lot, and making sure that your advocates are given credit is
Mm.
really, really valuable. So one thing that I always wish that orgs did more of is sort of like give attribution to folks who make a referral. So if I'm a
Yeah.
donor of yours and I'm let's just say I'm $100 monthly donor, right? But I go and get my friend and get him to sign up for a $20 gift. You should be giving me credit for that. You should treat me as if I was a $120 donor a month, right? Or something like that. I mean, you don't necessarily want to be that structured about it, but I do think that you want to make sure people see and feel the salience of the work they do to sort of promote you in the community,
Yeah.
and that happens by celebrating your advocates and making sure that they, both on an individual level but also sort of like at a broader scope, they're sort of treated, like the champions for your organization that they are.
Yeah.
um and then I guess the last one that I'll always say, that's always like the most popular one that's super exciting, is the nudge sort of effect, right? So in your checkout flow, maybe it's something where it's like, hey, instead of giving $100 now, why don't you give $10 a month? Some sort of little nudge like that. Oh, would you be willing to give 10% more? Those sorts of things are really, really effective. Um, but in general, I actually think that in a lot of cases, the nudge stuff can be, you want to be careful to not sort of take it too far.
Yeah.
I think there is a boundary there that exists.
Yeah. That's really good. Griff, thanks so much for taking some time to share your insights with our audience and your expertise. I think it's been really helpful and we really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Scott.